he said to me, "Don't move for 5 minutes or I'll come back and slit your throat." And then he was gone.
Suddenly we had 2 offences where someone was referring to a northeastern accent. So that was a new strand to the profiling, if you like, at that stage. Quite a problematic one, actually. It would have been better if he didn't have one, because we would have been happier that he was at least somewhere local.
The police now faced a nationwide search, but once again the rapist offended within the M25 radius. The day after the attack on Wimbledon Common, a young woman returning from a shopping trip in Epsom was dragged off the street and raped in Woodland.
After withdrawing, her attacker said he was going to tie her up. He then put a bin liner over her head. His final remark was that he had to go for a piss and that he would be back later.
Christine recalled that Antoni had been 3 or 4 hours late coming home and would not tell her what he'd been doing.
This photograph was taken at the Van Fest in September, which is our anniversary weekend. It's always held. And this would have been taken after the July and August rapes. And look at him there. And I often look at this photograph and think, you know, how could you stand there like that smiling? And yet all those things had gone on. This is what I can't understand. And we had an absolutely brilliant time.
But it just shows his mindset. Monday to Friday, raping. Weekend, happy families at home with his wife. Happy to sit there, watch a blind date with his Chinese meal on the Saturday night. And then happy to go out on the Monday and start raping again. A bad, bad man.
His sister came down from County Durham for a week to stay here with 2 of her children. And I found out later there were 3 rapes in that week. Couldn't believe it at all. Absolutely awful.
The man was obsessed with sex, would use prostitutes all the time. Somebody joined the company, he'd try to get them to go to a prostitute. And actually, you know, people were sickened by his behaviour. His own work colleagues just thought the man was, well, just sick, because all he ever went on about was sex. He sat at having breakfast with a colleague one day, and this colleague looked at the story of our young girl in Kent having been raped and remarked how dreadful it was. You know, that a 10-year-old could be snatched. And that Imiela turned round and said she probably deserved it. And that work colleague was so disgusted, he walked away, had nothing to do with him. Obviously, little were they to know that this was the rapist.
But even at home, Imiela found his sexual urges impossible to keep under control, and his attentions were directed towards his neighbour, Kathy.
He came over one day to borrow some tools for the car, and when leaving the house he slammed the door shut and grabbed hold of me and tried to kiss me, and I had to more or less fight him off.
I remember getting off the school bus, and I just remember Mum, Tony, Kathy sort of around the front door area of the house shouting. My boyfriend said to me, "Look, Kathy's accused Tony of flashing at her."
After he stood naked at the door, he rang up and said that he was ill, he needed help, and he was sorry and he didn't want me to tell anyone about it.
And when I came indoors, Tony was crying. He was sitting on the stairs, slouched on the stairs, crying. Just sort of saying, "I love you, Chrissy. You know, don't believe it. I wouldn't do that." Amongst all the madness, everyone was shouting and arguing. Amongst all the madness, I did say, "But he tried it on with me." And I don't think anyone actually heard. But that incident with Kathy gave me even more reason to think, I don't like this man.
I confronted Tony And he did say, yes, I thought I heard a knock at the door. I'd had a shower. I thought I'd heard a knock at the door. And I sort of poked my head round, standing on the bottom stair. And there was no one there. He said, but I saw Kathy sort of looking over through her front room window and never thought any more about it. And that was his explanation. And I believed it.
Friday the 6th of September 2002, Woking, Surrey. A 13-year-old girl is snatched from her bicycle and raped in the woods. The rapist had struck again, and the method was familiar. The police tried a new strategy. They would make a television appeal and prepared themselves for a massive response.
And the latest clues on one of the country's most prolific serial rapists. It's the biggest manhunt in the country. It's had huge publicity, and it covers an area of more than 500 square miles. The victims have ranged from the age of 10 to a woman in her 50s. Please give us a call. The number's showing on your screen, 0500 600 600.
The rapist's defiance of the police led to tragedy the very next day. A 14-year-old girl was raped in Hertfordshire. But each attack provided more clues to the rapist's identity. This time, the teenager was able to give the most accurate photo fit to date. This evidence was to prove crucial. The police had a DNA profile, and now they had a face to the rapist.
During the attack, the victim was asked to cover her face, or keep her face covered with her own clothing, which she did for a while, but she managed to pull the clothing to one side just to get a look at his face, and it was enough for her to be able to prepare a CD-fit image of him.
The police say experience tells them someone already has a good idea who the rapist is.
Somewhere, someone knows this person. They may not know him and think of him as a rapist, but someone out there does know.
A year into the investigation, police launched a television appeal, believing someone could reveal the rapist's identity. In response, they were inundated with over 10,000 calls. One of these came from Antoni Imiela's neighbour, Kathy Sherwood.
It said about him smelling of tobacco, and it came to me then when I was standing at the street door. He'd grabbed hold of me and I smelt that smell of stale tobacco on him, and then I just knew it was him.
Antoni Imiela was now a suspect, and police arranged to take a DNA sample.
He came home and the police arrived to take the DNA. Tony looked fine. He didn't look nervous or anything. And so I said, oh, what happens now then? He says, well, nothing happens, he says. We test it and nothing happens. You don't know anything, he says, unless we come back because we found it's a match. I said, well, how long does this sort of take? He said, 7 to 10 days. So Tony said, oh, if I see you coming up the road, I'll jump out the window then. Quite laughing, you know, quite his normal self. So off they went, and I think we had lunch, and I can't remember what we'd done in the afternoon.
When they said that, you know, he wants to be DNA tested for, you know, for being a rapist, I just didn't have shock. It felt like it clicked. That feeling I'd had, and somebody saying, yeah, he may have done these things, it just fitted.
It took 2 weeks for police to match Imiela's DNA with the forensic samples. Now they feared they had a potential killer at large. Police tracked Imiela and finally arrested him on the M20.
About 11:45 on the Monday night, I was woken this awful banging at the door. I thought, oh, you know, what's this? So put my dressing gown on, went downstairs. So, who's that? Police, I said, and I opened the front door, and there must have been at least 6 police officers standing there. And they came in and they told me they had arrested Tony.
I felt like I was in a film. It didn't feel like it was happening. You know, 1 minute you're asleep, the next minute your house is swarming with police, you're put in a car, taken away, and told that your stepdad's just been arrested. for being a rapist.
Spent quite a few days in a hotel in Maidstone while they searched this house, and in the morning under the hotel door came this paper that I hadn't ordered, and everything about the rates was splashed all over the paper. Oh, my world collapsed.
Detectives suspected Imiela might also be responsible for the kidnap and sexual assault of a 10-year-old girl in Birmingham, a week before his arrest.
Having just been swabbed and knowing that the game must be up for him, instead of being filled with remorse or fear as any normal person would be, he travelled up to Birmingham. He kidnapped a 10-year-old girl off the streets and forced her to live out a fantasy where she was his girlfriend. Instead of concealing his identity as he had done for all the other offences as well, he told her to call him Tony, and she was able to view him for the 4 or 5 hours over which the various offences took place. My view is that he was quite literally living out his fantasy.
At one point he told her that he thought his life was over and hers was just beginning. So clearly somewhere in his mind he must have realised that it was only a matter of time before he was going to be arrested, and this would be his final act.
Already in custody, Imiela was confronted by police.
She says, you said, has your dad ever done anything to you? Why did you ask her that?
No comment.
Is that interesting to you?
No comment.
She says, it was really hurting me. And she said to you, it's